tension between Congress and the presidency increases as talks over the U.S. debt ceiling stall. With the deadline coming up, will the U.S. default on its payments? If so, economically, what is this going to do to the State of the Union? And most importantly, and in perspective of this video, what would it do to the U.S. housing markets? According to the experts, if the debt ceiling isn't raised or waived, the United States wouldn't be able to cover its bills, imperiling ordinary citizens and roiling the U.S. and global markets. Are we going to default? And is it really the first time in American history that we have? Stay tuned to this video for more. Well, welcome back after that break, everyone. Mike Petras here with MPRE Residential, powered by NextHome Treasure Valley. And of course, thank you for joining me on another video to where we're going to go ahead and talk about one of the hottest topics right now happening here in the US, and that's whether or not we are going to raise the debt ceiling or we're going to default. But before we get into that, and of course, if you are looking to move right here to the Treasure Valley, please feel free to give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email. We'll be more than happy to discuss the best plan to go ahead and get you right here. And of course, if you are looking to move into this area from out of state, please click in the description below, download my free relocation guide, so that way you're in the know before you decide to make the move. Also, please, if you like this content, hit the subscribe button below, hit the notification bell so that you're constantly in tune with all the videos that I do come up with. And please give me a thumbs up. Let me know that I'm doing a good job. Comment below if you have any further questions, more than responsive to that, and look forward to fielding them. So let's get right into it. Let's see what's really going down. So what would happen to the U.S. housing markets if the U.S. defaulted on its debt? Well, the answer is really kind of obvious. Home sales would plummet, mortgage rates would climb even higher, and buyers' housing payments would more than likely soar by more than 20%. According to Zillow,
he took out a loan and all this.
An average mortgage payment sitting at $1,701 back in September would climb to over $2,000 if the default happened. That would be a 22% increase for home buyers if it went down. So it's really fair to say that hundreds of thousands of home buyers would be pushed out of the markets if this happened. Not only would the default warp the mortgage interest rates, but an increase in unemployment would also most likely occur. And economic uncertainty would definitely damage buyer demand. The economy essentially could lose 7 million jobs, and a stock market sell-off would erase $10 trillion in household wealth. Ouch! Housing market activity would also fall sharply, with existing home sales plummeting 23% at its worst, meaning the decline in home sales could be over 700,000. Home values could also decrease 5%. Currently, most predict home values to rise by 6.5% by the end of 2024. But of course, a default would absolutely change the ball game. With all of this, for potential buyers out there, it would make it much, much harder and further out of reach. The market, according to Zillow, would dive into a state of deep freeze. And really why? Because of mortgage interest rates. So why would interest rates rise? Well, because of the mass sell-off in Treasury bonds, notes, and bills that would occur due to such. And why? Because Treasuries that are known not to default are now defaulting. Wouldn't you sell if put in that position? How about global markets? If Treasuries go from a safe haven now to a default risk, or even a risk of delayed payment, then their price would go down and the Treasury yield would go up, pushing up mortgage interest rates with it, along with all the other consumer and business financing that comes directly tied with the Treasuries. And this would all translate into rising costs for home buyers. This could trigger 30-year mortgage interest rates, which are hovering around the sixes right now, to exceed 8.4% predicted or even higher. Average mortgage interest rates have not topped 8% in over 2 decades. According to Zillow's Jeff Tucker, the U.S. has never before defaulted on its debt, and they believe one is not going to happen. While the U.S. government is likely to avoid it, A lack of effective restraint on spending really kind of spells a bigger troubled picture down the road.
Come on, man.
Kicking the proverbial can. Now, Tucker does not expect the battle between the Biden administration and Congress really to result in a default, or if it does, he thinks it is going to be resolved quickly. But any agreement is unlikely to deal with any big issues in a substantive way, thus making no real commitment to cutting the deficit anytime in the future, which I think we all know. Other opinions is with Lauren Yun, who is the chief economist over at the National Association of Realtors, figures that a default would result in no impact if it's for a short duration, meaning 1 week or even a month can be withstood. He said that the U.S. basically knows, and the investors know, that the U.S. will pay up, though there will be a little bit of a circus along the way.
Mr. Putin, the American people decide their elections, not you.
According to him, the same goes for debt default. He does not believe that any missed interest payments will really lead to panic, because investors know that they'll be made whole when the debt ceiling eventually rises. So now that we've got a basic general picture of what could happen in the housing market if we go ahead and default, what is the real reality of the U.S.'s situation? Have they ever defaulted on any of their debts in the past? Well, in fact, the U.S. has. Oh yeah? When and how so? Well, let me tell you. The first default in the U.S. was on its first issuance of debt, the currency emitted by the Continental Congress in 1775. At that time, Congress had no power of taxation, so it made each of the several states responsible for redeeming a proportion of the notes according to the population. The notes progressively depreciated as the public began to realize that neither the states nor their Congress had the will or capacity to redeem them. In November of 1779, Congress announced a devaluation of 38.5 to 1 on the Continentals, which amounted to the admission of a default. In that year, refusal to accept notes became widespread and trade was reduced to barter, causing sporadic famines and other privations. Eventually, Congress agreed to redeem the notes at 1,000 to 1 at a rate of 0.82 troy ounces of the Spanish mill dollar, but overall the first default resulted in a cumulative loss to the American public. And this wasn't the only time. There was also 4 more that occurred, with the most significant impact made in the U.S. happening in 1933, when the U.S. government overtly defaulted on its gold bonds. The United States had in clear and entirely unambiguous terms proposed to World War I bondholders to redeem these bonds in gold coin, the Liberty Bonds, which started in 1917. Then blatantly, the U.S. refused to do so, offering depreciated paper currency instead. By the time Franklin Roosevelt entered office in 1933, the interest payments alone were draining the Treasury of gold. And because the Treasury only had $4.2 billion in gold, it was obvious that there was no way to pay the principal when it became due in 1938, not to mention meet expenses too and other debt obligations. In this exigency, Roosevelt decided to default on the whole of the domestically held debt by refusing to redeem in gold to Americans and devaluing the dollar by 40% against foreign exchange. The overall result of the default was to intensify the depression and trade reductions of the 1930s and to contribute to fomenting World War II. Given this circumstance, if we were to default this time, would it end up in World War III? Who knows, but let's hope not. The other significant default was the one that happened in 1971. That was when the U.S. government's commitment to redeem dollars held by foreign governments for gold under the Bretton Woods Agreement. Since that commitment was a linchpin of the entire Bretton Woods system, reneging on it was the end of the system. President Nixon announced this act as temporary to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. However, as we know, that suspension became permanent, allowing the unlimited printing of dollars by the Federal Reserve, is which we got today. So although we didn't go into really all 5 instances of it, really is that comparable to the possible default that we could have today? Not really. And why is that? Because some of those have just been instances in where the U.S. changed the policies for the bondholders, such as them trading currency or paper for precious metals. With the possible exception of a temporary delay in payments in 1979 because of technical glitches, the U.S. really hasn't experienced the kind of default that can happen if the debt ceiling isn't raised. Experts say that those previous defaults really do not constitute a true default, in which bondholders are just simply not paid, like we are facing today. So technically, according to some of the experts out there, have we ever really truly defaulted? No, we really kind of haven't. Would the effects of that default be cataclysmic? It definitely could. So now I guess the question is what would most likely happen if we defaulted right now? Most likely, all of the losses would be hoisted upon the shoulders of the Federal Reserve. And how? By having the Federal Reserve invest and purchase blocks of Treasury debt. Sound familiar? By this, the United States can basically prevent a default to real investors, basically, essentially, but at a huge cost. So is that good? Heck no. And lastly, will all this bickering between the presidency and Congress right now come to an end and the debt ceiling actually be raised? You can almost bet on it. And why? Because the debt ceiling was raised 78 times since the 1960s, including 18 times under Ronald Reagan, 8 times under Bill Clinton, and 7 times under George W. Bush. So you can see, the debt limit, nonpartisan. But in practice, the debt ceiling has never been reduced. So will the debt ceiling be raised and none of this come to fruition at all? Highly likely, but we shall see. So in essence, this is really politics at its worst. And if you're sitting on the fence hoping that something is going to happen to the housing industry and the housing markets as a whole across the United States, you're going to be sitting and waiting for a while. So, of course, the decision is up to you to see what's going to happen. And in my honest opinion, if this actually does happen and we do go into a default, is there not so many things that could be happen or that can happen and happen quickly to be able to recover from such? I believe that there is. In fact, even Donald Trump had came out during his CNN town hall and was basically saying, we have never seen something like this happen, so nobody really knows. But is it something that we really want to see? Well, probably not. But of course, if you are looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate right here in the Treasure Valley, please feel free to give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email. Would love to be able to sit down, talk with you, and be able to discuss the best options and the best game plan to go ahead and get you right here to the Treasure Valley. And of course, if you are looking to move into the Treasure Valley from out of state, better known as the greater Boise, Idaho area, please click in my description below, download my free relocation guide, so that way you're in the know before you decide to make the move. Also, please hit that subscribe button below if you like this content of what you saw. Hit the notification bell so that you're constantly in tune with all the videos that I do come up with. And please give me a thumbs up. Let me know that I did a good job. Also, feel free to comment below. Would love to hear your thoughts on what you think is going to happen here in the next couple of weeks. I'm very responsive to them. And also, if you do have questions about what is going on in the real estate markets right here, please check my videos at the end of this. See my last report of Mikey's monthly market updates, but also comment. I will be more than happy to explain what is happening right here in our markets. Well, thanks again very much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video like always. I look forward to the day that we speak. God bless. Until then, thank you so much. Bye-bye.